Alright, welcome back to the channel. We've now made it to week 4 of college football, where most teams have been getting into the very beginning of their conference schedule, but one of the last few non-conference games that is getting put together is the fact of the Tulane Green Wave, the current favorite to make the college football playoff into a group of 5, against SEC power Ole Miss Rebels. Right now, Ole Miss is about a 11.5 point favorite for this game. Jake Retzlaff has been leading this Tulane Green Wave over 2 Power 4 opponents and has really been carrying this team overall in the pass game and the run game. You almost have to be a little bit concerned, though, on Retzlaff's usage for the fact that he has more rushing yards as a quarterback than both the top 2 running backs on this team combined. Yes, Maurice Turner got hurt in the first Northwestern game and hasn't played since, but combination of Javen Gordon and Zuberi Mobley have only combined for 229 yards compared to Retzlaff 288, and Mobley has the only 2 rushing touchdowns that Retzlaff doesn't have whenever he has 6. Through the air, Retzlaff has been solid, but only at 59%. He hasn't really been needing to constantly throw the ball down the field too much. Tulane as a whole is a team that is going to run basically 2/3 running the ball and a third passing the ball, some from Retzlaff scrambles, some from RPOs, but it's one where their rushing game, especially with Retzlaff itself, has been very effective. The rest of the running game can be a bit hit or miss. We'll have to see if Maurice Turner comes back for this Ole Miss game to where they would have a three-man running back trio outside of Retzlaff to be able to carry more of the load for them. Now, with Ole Miss themselves, they've come off of 2 SEC wins, one against the University of Kentucky 30-23 2 weeks ago, and then they end up getting into a shootout last week against Arkansas in a 41-35 shootout. And one thing that has been consistently true with an Ole Miss team led by Lane Kiffin is the fact that they want to run a lot of plays. They're trying to get quick play offense. They're trying to get 80, 90 plays in for a single game. And that makes it, they're also going to be about a 2/3 to 1/3 split in favor of the run game. So yeah, Ole Miss as a whole, offensively, they have a bunch of weapons, especially in the run game, that they're able to build off of. This past game, they had Austin Simmons, who was questionable for this game, but they ended up showing after like 4 plays, even though he did throw a touchdown, he was not going to be able to continue on this game, so the chance of him starting is a bit in question on it. In this case, they end up going to transfer quarterback Trinidad Chambliss, who had like the game of his life. Chambliss was a D2 champion out of Ferris State, 3-star transfer. For this game, they didn't really know what was going to end up happening with Simmons being out. And what he does, he goes 21 for 29, 353 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 rushing touchdowns on the ground with 15 carries and 62 yards. So both of these teams are going to have substantial running game through their quarterback. Now, Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin is one of the biggest Power 4 brands that has truly enveloped themselves in the whole idea of the transfer portal, where this year coming in, they brought in 30 transfers, which does end up going through a good portion of their production for this offense. Overall, this team ends up averaging over 44 points a game. A lot of that ends up being a bit skewed off of the 63-7 win against Georgia State, where they were clearly overmatched there. But once you got into the first SEC games off of it, you end up getting more production. They've had passing game to be able to replace Jackson Dart, first round pick out of the Giants, and second round pick Trey Harris, who's with the Chargers now, amongst others. But they still have Logan Diggs, who's a backup running back who transferred from LSU 2 years ago, and they bring in Kawan Lacey, who has 290 yards on 61 carries with 5 touchdowns. Also, Troy transfer Damian Taylor also getting a few carries in, plus both their quarterbacks in Austin Simmons and Chambliss himself. Both of them carrying the ball 16 plus times with multiple touchdowns. Now, at this point, if we're going off of the possibility of Chambliss still being the starter for this game, overall 25 for 35 for 412 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and the 2 touchdowns on the ground. Austin Simmons, on the other hand, that was a ugly game that he ended up playing against Kentucky, to where both him and Zach Calzada really struggled, especially early on in the game, to be able to throw the ball with any sort of consistency and be able to not end up generating turnover. But yeah, Simmons for that game ended up having 2 interceptions and no touchdowns. On the game, they won by just a single touchdown. So a lot of that production ended up being relying on the entire running game. What was also concerning is the fact that Kentucky may be the worst team in the SEC, bar none, and they allowed Kentucky to stay around in that. Their defense allowed both Kentucky to rush for over 170 yards, plus Arkansas with a mobile quarterback in Taylor Green to run over 220 yards, and even Georgia State ran for 191 yards. They averaged nearly 200 yards given up per game going against a Tulane offense that is going to be heavily dependent on the run, and that they really have not been able to build any sort of a consistent pass game with Retzlaff outside of targeted Florida Atlantic transfer Amari Hayes. Yes, you've had a few catches from Bryce Bohannon, Shaz Preston, Justin Reed, Jadish Pascusi, and the running backs in the backfield. What Tulane actually has been lacking has been a consistent passing game throughout the entirety of the game. There's only one game that Retzlaff threw for over 60%, and this was this past game against Duke, but that was also after they gave up 40 plus points to Illinois. Luke Altmaier ended up torching that defense for 3 touchdowns and 290 yards. So the Duke defense itself likely is not great against the pass. Against the run's a little bit of a different story. Now defensively, really with both of these teams, neither team really is that good against the run. Ole Miss is the worst in the SEC, giving up nearly 200 yards a game at 194.7. And Tulane, for their fact as well. The one game they truly struggled with South Alabama, they were going against a team that was able to build its running game off of a dual threat quarterback, one that was able to do a bunch of RPOs in itself, with Bishop Davenport going for 63 yards and a touchdown, and then Kentrell Bullock, their starting running back for that game, going over 100. But even with the Duke game, Duke was a very meager running game that was barely able to get on with the Illinois game and Elon game in itself. They allowed Nate Shepard to run for 75 yards and the team as a whole to run for nearly 6 yards a carry against a more explosive running offense, the one that is entirely built off of its consistent running game, its bevy of backs that they're going to try to get on with you, and its way of scoring quickly through the run game and with its receivers, whereas Harrison Wallace has come on as their top receiver, a Penn State transfer who already has 339 yards in 3 games. Deuce Alexander, 155 yards in 3 games. Daquan Wright, the tight end, being 142 yards. Caden Lee's coming back for his 3rd year, nearly has 100 yards. So there is a bunch of pieces in this passing game as well, but to Tulane's credit, at the very least, they're actually PFF graded to be one of the top 20 rated coverage units in the country. Yes, a lot of that ended up kind of carrying over with the Northwestern game, where Jaheim Johnson ended up having 4 passes defended, but then you had Javion White, who had 2 interceptions that game. Jaheim Johnson had 1 as well. Kevin Adams had 1, and Javion White had another against Darian Mensah himself. And once again, through each of these 3 games, they won the turnover battle, and that's going to end up being a big factor for this game, especially if you get Austin Simmons, who to end up being starting, or even with Shameless, who hasn't had very much D1 action as a whole, even with just the Arkansas game, to see if that's just a one-off or if that's something that he can end up building on for the rest of the season, and Ole Miss becoming a true threat in the college landscape. Now, the big difference on this game, especially from the other Power 5 conference games that Tulane's played already, is Ole Miss has more of a cohesive and combined explosive offense in the run game and pass game. As I said, Lacey, as I said, Chambliss. If Simmons is able to play, then Simmons is going to be a strong presence in the run game. Then you also have, as I said with the hair, Wallace, Lee, Alexander, Wright. They're ones that have gotten, just with the Arkansas game, 40-yard touchdown for Harrison Wallace. Caden Lee had a 62-yard catch. Daquan Wright had a 64-yard catch as a tight end. So they are a very explosive offense and are trying to make mismatches on a defense that has shown cracks, especially in the running game. And this is a higher level of offense that the Tulane Green Wave have been able to face this entire game and this entire season. So in the same fact, like I said with Ole Miss, they are not very good as a defense as a whole. They only have 4 sacks on the season, 13 TFLs as a whole, 4 TFLs by D-tackle Xavier Harris, who also has the only pick as a defensive tackle. They forced 1 forced fumble, and they have 17 passes defended. One of their most influential players in the secondary for this team is Wyatt Williams, who ended up transferring from Louisiana Monroe. Yes, Williams was the best player on that defense by far last year, and for his benefit, he is proving that he was way too skilled for Monroe's team, and he's actually definitely worthy for playing with SEC competition. But you have other players like 4-star transfer Princewell Umiamiela. I think I got that right. He has not really shown much of anything He only has 2 solo tackles and 1 sack on the season. As a whole, they give up way too much on the ground, way too many explosive plays, and a lot of that ended up branching from mobile quarterback, just like Retzlaff is. Especially whenever Tulane Green for Arkansas, the starting quarterback, ran for over 100 yards last week and a touchdown. But even in that case, Retzlaff is maybe not the same body type as Tulane Green. He's probably not. Retzlaff came in basically a month before the season started, ended up winning this job for Tulane, and has been slowly and surely getting more together with this offense, where it was two touchdowns rushing in the first game. Yes, there wasn't really anything in the South Alabama game, but it was the first road game of the season for them. He got 4 touchdowns back at home against Duke. You wonder how that experience on the road with a close victory against South Alabama is going to affect how they are against Ole Miss this game. But it's going to be that last non-conference game of the year for the Green Wave before they go into conference play next week against Tulsa. Also going to be another road game. But this is one that most of the metrics favor Ole Miss to win this game, but it doesn't end up meaning a win for the Ole Miss Rebels. A win for the Ole Miss Rebels does not mean the end of the season for Tulane in their chances to make the playoff. There is a good shot for this Green Wave team to especially can be competitive, keep this within a 1-score game. Ole Miss has a defense that has not really been able to prove itself against its conference competition. And you had Pete Golding, who was the Alabama defensive coordinator the last 2 years. He basically got kicked out of town post-Saban and really hasn't been able to build up the defense like he really wants to, even though they have a pretty solid linebacker core with TJ Daugherty, between Taj Chambers, amongst others. It's one that has been exposed way too often, way too early. Especially in the same case, Tulane's defense, especially in the run game, has been exposed too often with Duke and South Alabama. Not too much Northwestern. They had no real offense whatsoever. But being in Vaughn Hemingway Stadium in Oxford, Mississippi, definitely going to be more of a raucous atmosphere than what Tulane would be expecting as a home game. But yes, they've struggled in SEC environments the last 2 times they played. Oklahoma and Florida last year, and actually Ole Miss again the year before, but that was also whenever Michael Pratt had gotten hurt. Hopefully Tulane can use this to their advantage for one way or the other, be able to boost their resume. It's going to be one of the better games of the day to watch. Neither defense has been overly impressive as a whole, so there's a good chance for this game to get to the upper 20s, upper 30s, and both offenses will have a good chance of going down the field. Most people think that Ole Miss is going to win this game for the fact that they have more of an explosive passing game, and Tulane hasn't played competition, even if it being 2 Power 4 opponents, not to a level of an SEC opponent. But we'll see how this happens. 2:30 on Saturday, Vaughn Hemingway Stadium. It's going to be fun regardless. I'm looking forward to it. We'll see how Tulane does once it gets closer on, and how Retzlaff and this run game and this collection of offensive linemen be able to react to an SEC-style defense and the SEC offense that is heavily influenced on Lane Kiffin and his kind of eccentric personality. All right, thank you all for watching. More content coming soon on this. More content coming for New Orleans Saints. We'll see if I'm able to get... I do plan on watching a good majority of this game. If I do plan on seeing this game in full, try to get a little bit closer to the end of the game reaction on it, so kind of get an idea on what more Ole Miss's flaws could end up being, for the fact they also play LSU at home the following week, and then Tulane goes into conference play, what they really need to work on, and how realistic is this team's playoff aspirations after this game going to be. Same thing on Ole Miss in the same fact. Ole Miss at this point feel like they are kind of one of those in-question teams that you figure you're going to get like 4 or 5 SEC teams in the playoff. You're expecting like a Georgia, you're expecting maybe an LSU, you're thinking maybe Texas will bounce back. Ole Miss is kind of in that group after that, where it's like Tennessee, Alabama, Missouri, Vandy, maybe a couple others, but more content coming on soon. Once we get closer to the middle of the season, we'll kind of do a little kind of recap on how the first half of the season as a whole came on, not just with Tulane itself, but kind of the whole playoff aspect as a whole, But yeah, thank you all for watching. Please like, subscribe on it. If you enjoy the content, please comment below if there's anything else you want to see on it. If there's anything in general, any corrections I need to make, anything that you think I need to improve on, please let me know. But thank you all for watching. Once again, I said more content coming in the future. See you on the next one. The idea that